The invisible cost of avoiding financial discomfort. Most people don't think they're avoiding financial discomfort. They think they're being careful, responsible, sensible. They keep spending reasonable. They avoid risky decisions. They stay in jobs that feel stable. They don't rock the boat. And for a while, that feels like the right move. But years later, something feels off. Income hasn't grown the way it should have. Savings feel fragile. Career progress feels slower than expected. Financial freedom feels distant, even though nothing has gone terribly wrong. That's when the uncomfortable realization starts to surface. What if avoiding discomfort has been quietly costing me more than I realized? Today we're talking about the invisible cost of avoiding financial discomfort, and why the choices that feel safest in the short term often become the most expensive in the long run. This topic matters because a huge number of people in the US and the UK are not financially failing, they're financially stalled. They're doing what looks reasonable. They pay their bills on time. They avoid debt where they can. They try to be careful with spending. Some even save and invest a little. From the outside, their situation appears stable. But internally, something feels wrong. Progress feels slow. Income doesn't grow the way it was expected to. Savings don't feel strong enough to create real peace of mind. Career paths feel safe, but narrow. There's a constant sense of being one step away from security, yet never quite getting there. Most people don't label this as a problem. They tell themselves they're being responsible. They avoid uncomfortable moves like changing jobs, negotiating pay, investing more aggressively, or cutting back on lifestyle habits that feel necessary. None of these choices feel reckless to avoid. In fact, avoiding them feels mature. The issue is that comfort quietly becomes the main objective. People stay in familiar routines because disruption feels risky. They delay decisions that might create short-term stress, even if those decisions could significantly improve long-term outcomes. Over time, this creates a pattern where life feels manageable but never expansive. The core problem isn't laziness, fear, or lack of intelligence. It's the gradual normalization of avoiding discomfort. Small choices stack up: a raise not negotiated, a skill not learned, an investment not started, a risk not taken. Each one feels insignificant on its own. Together, they shape a financial life that is stable but constrained. And because nothing breaks, nothing forces change. That's what makes this problem so hard to notice, and so costly over time. Avoiding financial discomfort isn't a personal flaw. It's a learned behavior, reinforced over years by how we're taught to think about money, risk, and responsibility. Most adults don't wake up and decide to play it safe. They arrive there gradually, guided by incentives that reward comfort and quietly punish uncertainty. One major root cause is how risk is framed in adult life. From an early age, being wrong carries visible consequences. A bad decision can be judged, criticized, or remembered. Doing nothing, on the other hand, rarely attracts attention. In financial terms, this trains people to see action as dangerous and inaction as neutral, even though inaction has long-term costs. Another powerful cause is the fear of short-term instability. Financial discomfort shows up immediately. A tighter budget, temporary stress, a dip in confidence. These feelings are tangible and uncomfortable. By contrast, the cost of avoiding discomfort, slower income growth, missed compounding, limited options, is delayed and invisible. The brain naturally prioritizes avoiding present pain over preventing future regret. There's also a structural issue. Many modern careers reward consistency more than experimentation. Staying reliable feels safer than stretching into unfamiliar territory. As a result, people confuse stability with security. They protect what feels predictable, even when it limits upside. Lifestyle habits reinforce this cycle. As income increases, expenses quietly rise to match it. Comfort becomes expensive to maintain. Any decision that threatens that comfort feels irresponsible, even if it could improve long-term outcomes. Over time, people stop asking, "What could grow me?" and start asking, "What won't disrupt me?" None of this is about poor discipline or lack of ambition. It's about systems that normalize comfort and make growth feel unnecessarily risky. And until those forces are recognized, avoiding discomfort feels like the smart choice, even when it's quietly holding progress back. Once you understand that avoiding financial discomfort has a cost, the solution is not to chase discomfort blindly. The goal isn't stress, anxiety, or reckless risk. The goal is intentional discomfort, the kind that expands your future without destabilizing your present. The first shift is changing how you interpret discomfort. Instead of seeing it as a signal to stop, learn to see it as information. Discomfort often appears when you're doing something new, asking for a raise, learning a skill that feels intimidating, investing consistently instead of waiting for certainty, or cutting back on spending that once felt normal. That feeling doesn't mean you're making a bad decision. It often means you're stretching a boundary. Practically, this starts small. You don't overhaul your life overnight. You introduce controlled tension, a tighter budget that creates saving momentum, a skill you work on outside your job before it's required, an investment habit that feels boring but consistent. These actions feel uncomfortable because they delay gratification, but they don't threaten your survival or stability. Another important shift is separating discomfort from danger. Many people treat emotional unease as risk, when in reality the actual downside is limited. Missing a promotion because you didn't ask is rarely catastrophic, but not asking guarantees stagnation. Investing modest amounts early feels uncomfortable, but waiting indefinitely is often far more costly. Finally, structure matters more than motivation. Discomfort is easier to tolerate when decisions are automated. Systems remove emotion. When saving, investing, and skill development are routine, discomfort fades into the background and progress becomes normal. Used correctly, discomfort becomes a tool, not a threat. It's the price you pay up front to avoid far greater costs later. The true cost of avoiding financial discomfort doesn't appear all at once. It unfolds slowly, often so quietly that people don't notice it until years have passed. Nothing breaks, nothing collapses, life keeps moving, and that's exactly why this pattern is so dangerous. In the short term, avoiding discomfort feels rewarding, stress stays low, routines remain intact, decisions feel safe. But over the long term, this comfort comes with compounding consequences. Income grows, but only marginally. Skills age instead of evolving. Financial buffers remain thin. Options narrow without anyone consciously choosing that outcome. What's most deceptive is that life can look successful on the surface. A stable job, a predictable routine, bills paid on time, but underneath, dependency increases. A single income becomes harder to replace. Fixed expenses become harder to adjust. Any disruption, a layoff, burnout, health issue, or economic shift, feels far more threatening than it should. By contrast, people who accept controlled discomfort earlier experience a different long-term reality. They don't necessarily move faster at first. In fact, early progress often looks unimpressive. But over time, skills compound into leverage, savings turn into stability, investments gain momentum. The same discomfort that once felt risky becomes the reason their future feels flexible. This is where financial freedom actually begins, not as excess or luxury, but as resilience, the ability to adapt without panic, the ability to wait instead of rush, the ability to choose rather than react. Those outcomes are rarely achieved through comfort alone. Avoiding discomfort doesn't eliminate risk. It delays it and concentrates it in the future. When recovery is harder and options are fewer, accepting small, intentional discomfort earlier spreads risk over time and creates room to adjust. The long-term difference isn't dramatic in any single moment. It's cumulative, and by the time it becomes obvious, it's often already shaped the direction of someone's life. When you step back and look at the full picture, one truth becomes hard to ignore. Avoiding financial discomfort doesn't protect you from difficulty, it postpones it. The discomfort you avoid today doesn't disappear. It accumulates quietly and shows up later, often in forms that are far harder to manage. Most people don't regret the moments when they felt temporarily stretched. They regret the chances they didn't take because they wanted to stay comfortable. The raise they didn't negotiate. The skill they kept postponing. The investment they waited too long to start. At the time, each decision felt reasonable, responsible. Even years later, the cost becomes clearer. This isn't about forcing yourself into constant stress or living in fear of falling behind. Financial discomfort, when chosen intentionally, is not punishment, it's training. It's how you build tolerance for uncertainty, confidence in decision-making, and the ability to think long-term instead of reacting emotionally. Real financial stability doesn't come from eliminating discomfort. It comes from learning which discomforts are worth accepting. The kind that expand your options instead of shrinking them. The kind that create momentum instead of anxiety. The kind that feel awkward now, but meaningful later. Over time, something subtle changes. You become less afraid of temporary instability because you've built buffers, skills, and systems. You stop needing everything to feel safe before you move. You gain patience, and with patience comes choice, the core of financial freedom. So here's the question to sit with. Which financial discomfort are you avoiding right now because it feels inconvenient, and what might it cost you if you keep avoiding it for the next 5 or 10 years? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where do you feel most resistant to discomfort, in your spending, your career, or your long-term planning? And what's one small, controlled step you could take that your future self would thank you for?